Good evening, workshoppers. Got a another episode here. We're on a weekly streak, and I'm happy to have a ton of Diablo information and news to go through and cover that actually warrant going through and recording here weekly. In this episode, I've got Dredscythe joining me as we go through and talk about some things because there's been a little bit of stuff that's been going on. Like I guess we had a new season drop or something. And some seasonal theme that is causing a little bit of discussion within the community. I'll put it out that. But then there's also been a whole lot more rumors and all this other types of stuff going around about like Diablo 2 remaster, Diablo Immortal, and the Diablo 4 dev blog is still a pretty hot topic. Where even like earlier today, I was seeing some people going through and posting around on the internet about like their thoughts and their feedbacks. I think one of them might have been you actually. Maybe just maybe. But it's like there's a lot that we have going on. So I'd like to welcome you all here to episode 191, season 21, Elation in whoa, as we children of the 90s would say.
Hot damn, almost 200.
I know, right? And if we keep up with the weekly episodes, it's going to come up a lot faster than expected. So long shot, I'm gonna be needing that history lesson here shortly as the official, unofficial historian of the Westmarch workshop, who joins us here in chat. But yeah, by all means, Dred. I think that pretty much at this point, anyone that's listening to the show, already knows who you are and what you do. But for old time's sake, let's just go ahead and tell them who you are and what you do and why you're on my lawn.
Because I make your lawn look pretty.
This is
No, just short version, because we could go long. So long.
You go long? I would never have thought. No,
not
possible.
Basically, done my own thing with the community work for a bit, but for a while, almost a decade in itself with Diablo. But then came over to this lovely place called BlizzPro, and recently, as of today, launched my own personal kind of sort of Diablo thing, but also kind of sort of personal website. Just cover Diablo, talk about it, try and most of the time in vain, try to get things at least looked at for the game, and but more importantly, try to be a good shepherd of the community and try to help bring people along and make it bigger and all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah, do you want to talk more about your website in particular, real quick, since you're just launching today?
Okay. Well, the website itself, because like, for those who actually have been following me on Twitter, they saw like this nice like image I did on Twitter about how I was leaving content creation for Diablo, and that's a whole separate ball of wax that I talk about in my first Dredscythe blog post on Dredscythe.com. And as the title aptly says, wait, I thought you left, because, well, I did. But, after discussions within the community with other people, and also talking to Adam himself, because I reached out to him trying to get a bearing for how the whole community aspect was going to go going forward, because when Brandy left, all of us were mainly left with a big question mark on our head, like, what's our place? Who's our contact? Are we still going to be, in that, I hate to use that term, inner circle, because it makes us sound like we're above it all when we're really not, but it's like the easiest way of describing the situation. So I reached out to him, had a talk with him, and I felt like me, with my family, with my wife, and my now checking, 15-month and 2-day-old daughter, that I felt like what I would be able to contribute to the Diablo 3 community and how I participated in it would still be considered satisfactory, to still be considered part of that. Again, I don't like the term, but it's easier way of describing it, inner circle. So with that,
So
I
when did you
wrap.
join the Dark Angels? Sorry, that's a
Oh,
terrible Warhammer joke. You can continue.
so with that, I decided, okay, how am I going to approach? How do I actually want to like take a step back, and how do I want to approach content creation? Like something that I don't think I've really seriously asked myself, because whenever I've done Scythe and Shield, it's like I was going through the motions because I thought that's what I had to do to keep myself in. But I asked myself, if I could do whatever I want and still be considered worthy, it would actually just be that blog, talk about Diablo, talk about a different thing, not have to spend 2.5 months making a development hell blog that's basically equivalent of a thesis paper. Like, make bite-sized chunks instead, and maybe get the point across better that way, more digestible in a sense. So that's what the website's purpose is. It's kind of like a continuation of all the theory. I thought it was an insult because I saw it as a comment on the Dev Hell for YouTube, where some guy was like, "What is this?" And then someone said, "Oh, this is just like development theory crafting." And I thought it was initially insult, but then I realized, no, this is the perfect thing to call what I do. So I'm like, so the development hell series will be for the feedback for Diablo 3, Diablo 4, and it'll continue on when I can the developmental theory crafting for Diablo 4. And then the personal blog is for, personal stuff. And I also intend on making a greater Diablo community page where I'm going to try to get as many streamers on there, get all the podcasts on there, get all of the other fan sites and groups like Level with a Cause on there, and just have it be an homage to the community, and just have 1,001 links. So as new people come along, it's like I'm kind of building like almost like the Twitch directory of Diablo streamers on that page, because I want people to somehow know how big and how cool our community is. I want to put that on display, and by doing that, kind of give back to the community in a small way.
Yeah, and I do just want to point out that you mentioned the Level with the Cause fundraiser, which was they had the season 21 fundraising charity event that Wolf Crier put on. This season was for Save the Children again, and they successfully raised almost $4,000. It was $3,861 was raised for charity. It's a really, really cool thing. Talked about this on the show. I've actually had Wolf Crier on the show, many an episode ago, going through to talk about Level with the Cause, the charities that he chooses and he goes through with, and that it's a really cool, nice little thing that ties in with every single seasonal launch. It's something that you should definitely go through and look into. If you're listening to this or watching on YouTube or in chat, of course it's now ended. It's just for that opening weekend, but it's something that you should definitely go and check out and be ready for. When season 22 comes up, there will be another round of Level with the Cause.
Yeah, and on that topic, just briefly, I always love, like, as we're level, like, 8 o'clock hits, the season launches, going through, and then around 10:30, 11, when you hit 70, and then we start going through the chapters, our group, like around like the last 5 or 6 seasons, like usually around 12 to 1 o'clock in the morning, I always check the fundraiser because I want to see how well it's doing, because I always want to do as really good as I can, and like try to support it through like retweeting. I've been doing articles on Blizz Pro the help put out there. I know Zenkiki over at Diablo Fans has been doing that for the last couple of seasons, and that's been that's probably the biggest boost that he gets on top of anything if like Diablo retweets it or anything like that. And it's just like, it's like one of those things that like we as a community can look back and say like, Wolfcry is really doing a great thing, and this is a really positive thing that the community comes out and does and supports season after season after season for a while now, and it's just great to see. And Wolfcry is a really great guy for doing this.
That he is, and I definitely look forward to future ones. This season was the first time that I participated myself in order to go through and help out charity, and it's going to be cool, going and seeing it evolve, as we transition from like Diablo 3 into Diablo 4. And it's not even just about Diablo. It's just once that weekend's picked, he's opened it up to other streamers, streaming different games. You don't have to stream Diablo to participate or anything like that.
Yeah, it's just like that's like the weekend that there's like the most, eyes glued to like streamers. And that's when like the hype is at its highest for the season. So it's the best opportunity to get a handle on it.
It was one of those ones. It was created by Diablo streamers as a way to kind of like go through, or specifically, I say Diablo streamers, but it was created by Wolf Crier and shared with Diablo streamers to go through and kind of like have an impact and give something back to charities, something that he himself, like dearly believes in. And but then over time, like more people became interested in wanting to go and open it up a little bit. But yeah, it's like going through and speaking of, the season and such. It's kind of like a lot of hot topics that have been going through the community. As far as the season itself goes, there was a lot of predictions about like who was going to go through and be on top. What was the best build. And it's something that some people, they kind of started changing their ideas as we had that little bit of time before season to go through and get started. But now that people are like really starting to dig into it, we see the potential of a lot of things have been taking off. Particularly, I guess, to like start off with some of the good things. The God set, the GOD, Gears of the Dreadlands for Demon Hunters. It was a lot of the tier lists that people went through and put out there were expecting the GOD set to be definitely good. It was going to be like one of those top tier builds, but probably still overshadowed by barbarians and witch doctors. But now we're starting to see a little bit more of what potential that set really has, and it might be number one. And
it definitely has that potential. And if I never know if I'm saying his name right, but Woodiju, if he can find a way, Woody. Yeah. I'll just say Woody. If Woody can find a way, he will find a way, and he's the guy to look at.
Oh yeah. It's one of those ones. It's like he's after kind of like going through and quitting the Diablo 3 theory crafting and content creation. He's back this season. And with a vengeance, going and pushing that Demon Hunter. Gosh, I'm hanging around like Kushi and Tuba too much with that pun.
I mean, I wasn't gonna say anything, but
yeah.
you did.
But it is, it's one of those ones where it's not just that like it's a marvelous push set, like it's everything. It's the end all be all. It's your T16 build. It's your bounty build. It's your speed GR clear build. It's real shit.
And it's really strange too, because like normally, I'm trying to think of like what sets have been like that in the past. I'm trying to think like wizard builds, like Veer's like technically was capable, but in order for like to be like a really solid like push build, you need a decent amount of Paragon. Like this build, you don't need shit.
No, you don't.
I think it's like the way it operates, the way the multipliers were dictated, and I think the way you can almost kind of like sub like depth diggers. You can sub it in, you can sub it out. You can go gold wrap with hunter's wrap for that way. You can do like wraps of clarity, or you could put on nems. There's enough. In the gearing process and the cube, along with the legendary gems, which is usually once a build is dictated, the legendary gems are just as set. But even the legendary gems, along with the gear, there's so much play that in the end, this build really, as you were stipulating, could just be the Omni build. It says like move over UE. It's like I'm the new king. And as I mentioned to the group yesterday. It's like it was so weird playing build with like two one-handers again, like two one-handed crossbows,
Oh, yeah.
not like a two-handed yangs and not an impale. Like oh my god, I actually could do different transmogs for once.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just because it checks off multiple things. It has fabulous potential as far as like killing a whole bunch of mobs when you're doing like lower level content. It is super fast. It's like probably like one of the
Oh yeah.
fastest builds in the game. Just for in terms of like your movement speed and everything else that a demon hunter has always kind of had innately. But it's just insane about how fast it can go through and because it's mostly a generator build, it doesn't even really care whether it's clipping through content super fast, because that's one of the things with say Impale. Even though like Impale would be pretty good as far as being like a speed clear, because you're just going through and killing a whole bunch of elites,
Yeah.
and like just like speeding through because you got the speed to do it. If you over gear the content too much, it actually you can't play the class, or you can't play that particular build,
Yeah.
because you have to be able to throw multiple impales to get
Hmm.
your hatred back, which is not the case with this particular build. And that's something that is coming from a set that's designed, at least like within the modern the modern era of Diablo 3. And so they kind of have a better idea or understanding of what is fun to play, what's not so much fun to play, and what is kind of designed to be extremely powerful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's definitely, and it's also like a breath of fresh air because it's again, it's not UE, it's not, and it's not Impale, so it's it's just nice to like figure out the rhythm of another build.
and it's a true strafe build too. Because like the for a long time Natalia's was just all about strafe, because it was proccing the set piece bonus to reset the cooldown on Reign of Vengeance. But
Hmm.
strafe was, you didn't do damage while strafing. Strafe was just reducing the cooldown so that way you could do damage, more or less. And
Yeah.
and now this one, actually the strafe is the mechanism for it. Um,
Hmm.
it's uh it just is it's interesting going through and seeing that, where with we've had, of course, with like the Valor Crusader, or Mundanugus and such, which kind of like that is like a defining set for the class now, and able to go through and push them into the highest levels of content.
Hmm.
They still would have other things that might be better in particular scenarios. Whether you're going through and speedrunning content or you're doing bounties, there's other builds that are better or faster, at least in that respective content. In order to go and play. But with the or with the Demon Hunter, with the God, it is. It just trumps everything. It's like the best in every category. There's really no reason to play any of the other sets unless you specifically want to, push with that set.
Yeah. Like at this point, because we were talking briefly before the show, and you had asked like how the season was. Um, I was running in Pale because that was the Hadrix gift,
The
so it
opener,
was
yeah.
natural just to at least get like a decent ancient weapon, get the 6 piece going, and then you're pretty much golden.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty much any holy point, now that it has the multiplier, that's like the key thing. Maybe cooldown just to help you out.
Yeah.
Um,
And I guess with the changes to the holy point shot itself, it does also give Impale, I guess, a little bit of a place there if you wanted to push like high end multiplayer groups as your Rift Guardian killer.
yeah, I could see that, but Impale has always been weird because since you're doing single point damage, and uh, the holy point gives you two more. Gives you 3 impales for the cost of 1, and you're basically just buffing and buffing and buffing your impale damage. The weapon is so critical that if that had not having a really good weapon is like the biggest detriment to that build. Whereas there's I think a little bit more forgiveness with the new God set. But also because I was doing the Impale set and I was just stocking up on the set pieces and the auxiliary pieces until I got a decent version of each one. My Impale was at roughly one mil sheet damage. By the time I switched over to the God set, I had brought myself all the way up to 1.5 sheet damage. I was like, I don't know how good I'm gonna be, guys. Like being honest, because like I don't know, it's a new. I didn't do real. I did a little bit of PTR testing for once, but the set wasn't ready. They did the tweaks and everything. So we
I
go.
oftentimes forget that there is even a sheet damage number on the character because it means so little nowadays.
Yeah, and it varies wildly in meaning between classes. Like for monks, it's usually really low, but since the multipliers are so much more impactful, it doesn't really matter as much compared to say like a wizard where you usually have a shit ton of GDPS, but like somehow it doesn't equal out. Well, that's another discussion.
Mm-hmm.
So I had the 1.5 mil sheet. I'm like, I don't know how this is gonna be. I don't know how the multipliers are gonna work out. So we do like a GR95 and I say, hey, let me just like tackle a Rift Guardian by myself. Rift Guardian comes, Rift Guardian dies. Like, okay, it's good. It was a really cool thing to say. Like, okay, I did it right, I built it right, and it kills good, maybe too good. And then as I said, we realized something because Knight was trying to do a little bit of support
Mm-hmm.
with his God Demon Hunter, so he put on a Calamity. So Calamity gives a 15% damage boost. So if you think of it mathematically in the terms of monster health, it's kind of like removing 15% of the monster's health. So you only need to do 85%.
Mm-hmm.
So when we were doing 95s, I noticed, this was back when I was doing Impale, I noticed that like I could only get like really 3 hits on any given yellow champion, maybe like 2 or 3 on any given champ pack. So when we started doing 95s with the Calamity, he was having problems maintaining the build, and he was wondering why. He thought it was a bug with the Calamity. So he took it off, he ran it in 95, everything went smoother. We were wondering why. And then I thought, wait a minute, is he having an Impale like effect going on because the build needs to be able to do a certain amount of hits within a certain amount of time in order to sustain itself so it can function. So I said, well, the Calamity does 15%, average GR level, health goes up, I think it's like 7% per GR tier. So I'm like, okay, so 15%, roughly 14 go up. So we did a 97 with the Calamity. He was running beautifully, almost no issues. So we all had a great chuckle because we're like, oh my god, it's like it doesn't have the resource suffering effect; it has the momentum suffering effect. So because of that, we were doing 97s, and we were actually doing them better than we were doing the 95s.
Yeah, and that's one of the big things of a lot of those builds, particularly Impale is as we just mentioned, is that you have to have the mob stay alive for a certain length of time, and so there is a kind of like a scaling system of where the builds themselves will go through and function. And that is like one of those ones where it's like for a lot of people that are going through and you might not have ever really done like kind of like higher end like group content or anything like that. The builds might not always be playable from 75 to 130 or vice versa, or some builds might only work if supported like in a group. Rat runs that were the existence for so many seasons. The rat run necro build had to have a support necro in order to function in those group ones if you were playing it just as what you would find like on D3 Planner, the Diablo fans build guides. And so it is one of those ones that there are certain little nuances that you'll get when playing a class or playing a particular set or build that it's like might not work all that well. We'll crank it up a little bit higher and it might actually run better.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, he was running a regular legendary Calamity. He had an ancient one, put it in, we raised it up another 2 levels, and we only added around 20-25 seconds onto the time, but going up 2 levels. So we had a great chuckle when Lion Sword came in because he's running Necro, so frailty's being added to this. So 85, so 15 per, so the frailty auto kills at 15%, so you do 85 there, and then the calamities adding 15% damage. So, but it's like a multiplier of the rest. So the group only needed to do 72.25% damage to any given monster, champ pack, or GR to kill it. So we quitted it like, okay, we were doing 95s, we upped it to 97. He put on ancient weapon, and now we have this. Like, okay, we can start at 101, and it was only maybe about another 15 seconds slower than the 3-man, because it was almost like direct scaling as we were going up with everything, because that's just how it worked. So it was one of those cool moments that we all kind of said, like, this is really cool, because there's not many of these moments left in this game after 8-9 years almost, where you feel like you figured something out, like something was a problem and you're like, wait, is it like this? And it is. There's not many of those moments left, and we all had like a chuckle, but like almost like smiled, like oh, this is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and it's like not to keep everything too focused on the Demon Hunter, because the Necromancer actually received a little bit of love this season as well.
You got that one covered.
Yeah, and it's like the change that they made to Raz's Vision, basically just makes it so that way your mages always gain the singularity, as well as the gift of death rune for mages, but made it so that way you have a form of damage reduction when you're not at full essence. There was some older builds that would use like the Aquila in order to get like some damage reduction, just because they never use their essence. But this one is for those builds that do have a spender, and they are going to be burning through their essence in order to give them a little bit of extra damage reduction. And that's changed quite a bit. And even with the nerf to Reaper's Wraps, the actual Singularity Mage builds are not really all that nerfed, because now with those shoulders, when combined with the Legacy of Dreams, you're able to run Blood Mages for an even longer duration on the mages themselves. So that way you're getting an extra couple seconds out of them. So to kind of like counterbalance that internal cooldown, as far as resource gains of like Reaper's Wraps, if you even really need it. If you're killing enough, the mages themselves are also going through and giving you corpses that you're through Devour, you're getting a lot of your essence back and such. So you can have maintain a pretty good collection of mages during that. There's a little bit less of a focus on the Simulacrum, since the Haunted Visions change just kind of went through and broken that kind of interaction, but still is a very powerful build, that really hasn't lost anything. It's the how you play it has changed a little bit since the last iteration. But then also like a lot of the Pestilence builds have gotten a pretty sizable buff, with the damage bonus from the set being doubled for Corpse Explosion and Corpse Lance. In particular, like going through and doing like Torment 16 or Speed Clears with the new like Corpse Mancer builds, because of the damage increase that was given to Corpse Explosion, when you're going through and using the very extremely creepy and just unsettling Blood Rune for Corpse Explosion, where it actually turns into like the ribs pop out of the corpse and it will scurry across the ground to go and hit targets that are close by. I'm
sure you just love that.
Oh, I hate and love it at the same time. It's so beautiful and unsettling. It makes you want to vomit, but you can't stop watching. It is one of those ones where it's like it's amazing. It's awesome to go through and like give those things a try. But of course, then they also, the Necromancer, not as big of a splash on the scene as the GOD, but the Mask of the Burning Carnival, the new Necromancer set, which is a Simulacrum and Bone Spear setup, has been a lot of fun. I was going through and on that first night being able to like speed run 85s, after going through and getting the set together. That one is kind of new for me. Being able to go through and speed run at that kind of like that high level with like no gyms, no ancients or anything like that, to just go and get done, was a nice change as far as having that kind of like power boost. I know that's not a change for a lot of people and a lot of the big streamers and such that have been over time. But at least for me and my own kind of slower rate of progression, being able to hop right in there was pretty insane. With just how powerful the set build is, and it's just so different from any other Necro build that I've really played. That it's fast. It is, it's when you're going through I'm using like one of the generatorless builds, so it is for speed running content. It's not for pushing or anything along those lines, but it's a nice change of pace from pestilence builds or the singularity builds and such. It actually is some varied gameplay for the Necromancer, and it's nice. And then, of course, there's the new Scythe build because of the change to Haunted Visions, allowing your Simulacrum to copy your Poison Scythe, as well as the Visions on the shoulders, giving you a added form of damage reduction. This new Legacy of Dreams build for the Poison Scythe Necromancers that are able to just kind of like run around with Grim Scythe and killing everything along with their little Simulacrum copies is it's a treat. It's a lot of fun. Going through, and again, it's another one of those ones where even though these kind of like Scythe generator builds have existed for a while, not at this level, because it was on Sunday, and I was solo clearing like 100s with no problem, and then once I got my gyms up, and once I got my a couple extra pieces of ancients, I managed to get up to like a 105 clear. Which is something within the first weekend I've never done before. I don't think that I've ever really pushed past 100 on a Necromancer in a season before, ever. And being able to do so within a couple of days really is a testament to the power when I'm still missing like, 6 Ancients, and I'm using like level 70-ish gyms. It's powerful. It's really powerful. I just got the Stone Gauntlets last night. I haven't played it all today, but I can't wait to throw that into the build, get in there, and go and try it out. And it's just going to be insanity as far as it's how tanky. It's just so strange having a tanky, Necro build, which is another one of those changes with the Burning Masks, because you're basically wearing like a double unity. Because you're splitting damage with both of your Simulacrums, since it unlocks, all of the runes for it, that you have the 2 copies, and it's just it's very tanky for a Necro build.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if you didn't bring it up, because all the typical players, Lord Fluffy among them, were saying how tanky it was, and I'm like, okay, like I can understand Simulacrums, the whole essential double unity, but I wanted to make sure if you didn't bring it up, that you brought it up and explained or talked about it, because, like as you said, like we all know, like Necromancers, they're the
squish.
ultimate glass. They're like the ultimate glass cannon, and their armor is made of wet tissue paper.
Yep, it's a necro. That's one thing that the Necromancer shared with like the monks for so long, that the basically the way to stay alive at higher level Rift content when you're going through and pushing solo was to take the Dark Souls route and get good. Just don't get hit. That's how you survive. Don't get hit. You get hit, you die, and so you don't get hit. So the best way of improving your gameplay, don't get hit. And that was it. But now you have a couple of builds that are capable of surviving, and that's always fun. I like surviving. I like not dying a million times in the Rift. It's good.
Oh yeah. I don't know if you're using it. How's the new version of Final Service? The 2 death passive? Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's that one. It's like I've not really been using any pet builds. So it hasn't really come into effect, because like when you're playing with the Burning Masks, the Simulacrums themselves, I guess it's weird that because they're not considered. I'd never really played around with Simulacrum enough beforehand to really realize whether it triggered, if they died along with the trigger or not. You know, because kind of like when you were playing like the Singularity mages, you know, if you triggered final service, you died shortly thereafter. Um, but now having like at least a little bit of a window with it, and it not killing all of your pets is nice. But the simulacrums will also sacrifice themselves if you die. So it's if you're running final service with one of the simulacrum builds, it's like prophecy on Crusaders. You have two kind of like get out of jail free cards. You do have to,
two,
you
two
do
unities and two
yeah,
get have free.
yep. Though
Like,
you do have to be careful with the burning mask, because you normally don't run a lot of cooldown reduction on that build, which is strange for a necro. It's not all that powerful for the build. So you might run into an instance where your simulacrum sacrifice themselves for you, and simulacrum itself is still on cooldown. And that is your damage, because the set bonus actually halves your damage. You don't kill anything, but your simulacrums do all the killing. And so they can sacrifice themselves, you stay alive, and then now you're stuck waiting 30, 40 seconds, however long it might be, before you can, reuse the ability. Or is it just worth it that, the ability resets when I die, so I'll just throw myself in there, die, and then resummon them and go again, because that will just be faster. Taking the 5-second penalty on the Greater Rift versus waiting for the rest of the cooldown.
How necromancer of that kind of decision.
Yes. Fitting. Yeah, it really is. But but that also segueing into it, that the way that like that particular set works is also causing some issues with the seasonal theme, which has been kind of plagued with issues. And something that necromancers are going through, and notice that if your simulacrum kills something, it doesn't add as a kill counter for your seasonal buff. And so for me, with the majority of the time that I've been playing as the Burning Mask, or not as much, but a pretty decent amount when playing as a Poison Necro, is that the seasonal buff for me does literally nothing. That with like the Burning Masks, clearing an entire Greater Rift, I will maybe across, the 1 or 2 seasonal buffs that I'll get, 40 kills.
Wow.
Because because remember, the set reduces your damage. Your simulacrums are the things that are killing.
Yeah.
And when when the simulacrum gets the kill, it doesn't add towards the seasonal buff. And that applies not just in the Burning Mask set, but in, like I said, the Poison Scythe set, to a limited extent. They're doing like as much damage as you are. So it's kind of almost a coin toss. You got a 1 in 3 chance of getting the kill with the Poison Scythe, versus the Burning Mask, where you have very limited. But then when I was going and playing around with the Pestilence set, doing some T16 stuff, I was noticing a huge difference, like in the number of kills that I was going through and getting when I wasn't using. Yeah, and I don't know if that is something that's specific to Simulacrum. I haven't done any testing because I don't have a Singularity build put together quite yet, to see if it's any pets. Or if it's just an issue with the Simulacrum, if it's just an issue with the Necromancer. But it is one of those ones where there's definitely some interaction between, do pets count towards the seasonal buff kills, and that has made it so that way, when you have a seasonal buff go off with 15 kills, it does no damage. Is doing like millions of damage, which is nothing, and even a modest 85. And so it's that is of course problematic, in addition to a lot of the other issues that people have been having with the seasonal buff. Whether it's just there's been wide reports of lag. I don't know if you've experienced any of it, but I know when I'm in a Greater Rift, I will usually once or twice a rift have the game freeze on me for about 5 to 10 seconds.
Yeah, last season and this season, in GRs, sometimes rifts, like, I would have like this, it was almost like cyclical, like go like 10-15 seconds fine, and then have like a moment where like the game seems to like lock up and freeze for like 2 to 3 seconds. But like inputs were like, any inputs put in there were still valid. So doing Impale, like the only real good defensive option you have is the elusive ring. So like as soon as I noticed it, I would have to hit Shadow Power to make sure I refresh the elusive ring. So when I came out of this lockup, I still had some defenses going, and I wouldn't proc and then die
Mm-hmm.
through that, and it worked 95% of the time. But there's always those instances where it's like, yeah, it did it, went through, affix soup is on the screen, and
Yeah.
still died.
And it's just one of those ones I've noticed because I didn't have this problem last season. I wasn't having the game just randomly go through and lock up at intermittent points in time. And then, it's one of those things I could have just chalked it up to, oh, my internet's having issues or something along those lines. But I was streaming. And the stream was fine. I wasn't dropping any frames. There was no internet, connectivity issues or anything like that, with the stream. Yeah. It was just the game. But then I see other people that are going through and experiencing similar problems on Reddit or the bug report forums and such. They've been having kind of like performance issues with the game, whether it's the game freezes or just that the seasonal theme itself is causing too much clutter, or that is causing them just overall performance issues while the seasonal theme is happening, that they're lagging or dropping frames or something along those lines. And then of course, I don't know if you've experienced it, but depending upon the tile set that you get within a rift, because when you're going through, and especially with the greater rifts, and that they'll give you a particular tile set, and then it'll give you like a weather effect, and sometimes there's that day night cycle in the Act 2 tile sets when you're out in the desert. That normally when it goes nighttime, you see a little bit more of the dust flying across the screen. It darkens it up a little bit. When you're regularly playing, not that big of an issue. When the seasonal theme triggers, that dust actually is just now completely opaque. You can't see through it, and it cuts off like a quarter of my screen, where there's just these bands of of opaque darkness moving across the screen that I can't see through.
Yeah, in a similar vein, I remember I was in one of the cathedral levels, and I don't know how to describe it. Those offshoots, when you're coming around a corner, but there's that back passage that you can go into, kind of go around the corner. I went into one of those, and as I was coming out, the weather effect I think triggered for the snowballs, so it was snowing. But the way the weather effect was triggering with the way the map hit itself to let you see where you were, it looked like a part of the map just didn't exist. So it looked like map load lag. I'm like, where's the map? I know where I'm going because I know the tile set, but it's and then the weather effect went away and everything went back to normal. There was no lag. It wasn't the load lag or anything like that. It was always there. It was just the weather.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then
we may have to think about this one.
Yeah, and then there's also another one that I've been seeing a lot of reports on. The forums and Reddit has been people with sensory issues are being highly affected by it because of the screen darkening, the flashes, and things that accompany the beginning of the seasonal bonus. Is something that's been going through and has been causing some people with sensory issues, triggers for their problems or other things along those lines. It's got a lot of issues going on, and that's even before we even get into the mechanical problems with the game. How it's making it so way some people just can't play the game. Period. Is something that the Diablo 3 development team themselves have taken seriously over time, with mapping out color usage of the being able to identify all the different items, as well as adding in the star and asterisks, so that way you can better tell the difference between set and ancient items, if you can't tell the difference between orange and green, and
all the little things.
Yeah, a lot of things that they've added into the game over the years that were specifically for people, that either had color blindness or sensitivity to different colors and things of that nature. And this one is just one of those ones where it's I'm sure it wasn't intentional that they went through and made the seasonal bonus this way. But when you're dealing with a more limited development staff and more limited resources and such, maybe it's something that didn't get the appropriate amount of testing, before it was put out there.
Yeah.
Because some people are just asking, allow me to turn off the seasonal buff, so that way I can play the game.
Yeah, or at minimum, I would think like turn off the weather effects because, I mean, eventually, I mean, uh, no. Well, I see what they did the weather effects because the weather effects indicates what's actually coming. It would be weird to like have to go to the tooltip and the tooltip says it because then you're spending a half a second trying to figure it out each time. And if you're a hardcore player, that could actually kill you, depending on how things go. So I can understand that quality of life potential issue. But yeah, it's like during the beginning of the season, I was really wondering if the seasonal theme was actually causing the performance issues that I was experiencing because I was like, okay, are the servers just getting slammed because everyone's playing? But like the days afterwards, like even if it was during prime time, like it always came back with like that weird like micro freezing, I guess.
Yeah. And I mean, they've obviously been making a lot of changes on the back end of the seasonal theme, because opening night on Friday night, like it wasn't triggering once every minute and a half. Like it would sit there and wait, or like the buff cooldown would like drop and then reset itself, but there was no bonus. Nothing came down. There was no meteors or anything like that. Or like even going through and watching some of the European streams, like the seasonal buff wasn't triggering until they hit a level 70, whereas on NA it was triggering like the whole way. You didn't have to be 70 for the buff to come on. And then other times, like watching some of the other streamers, is that like the seasonal buff, especially on the EU side of it, it would trigger nonstop. Like they would just be a walking wall of meteors. That or the crotch lasers, as coined by Pez Radar on Twitter, would just be going off for minutes at a time. Like it would because it would like go through, the buff would click down and you just got crotch lasers twice in a row, and so it was going off. You were just shooting lightning from your junk for 3 minutes. And so there's a lot. Those issues have all been fixed, kind of like by the end of the first night. So they're definitely, we're working on the back end of it and getting things going through and working. And Blizzard is actively going and collecting feedback on the issues. So I'm sure it's something that will it will be an issue that I imagine that we won't have to live with for the entirety of the season. It will just be how long will it take for them to do something about it. Particularly just like the screen effects. Like the seasonal bonus is fine, without the accompanying screen effect. As long as we're going through and paying attention, to the little buff icon down there at the bottom, we don't really need the whole screen to go black or red or white or yellow or whatever it is that's going through and accompanying, the combination of seasonal buff with what other weather effect is already playing on the map that you're playing on.
Yeah, I mean, they could just change the icon. They can kind of pull like a convention of elements. Like when the meteor's coming, there's a picture of a green meteor. When the tornadoes are coming, show its Twister icon for crying out loud. So on and so forth. Lightning, just show a whole bunch of fancy firework lasers on the icon.
Yeah.
But I guess just the last thing I guess I can add to the conversation is those green meteors. Like they trigger hard, because when I see those things, I'm like, oh my god, where's Belial?
Right,
like,
you have to. It's like, yeah,
it's like D3 vanilla all over again. Inferno, like when he was saying the gatekeeper, it's like puny mortal die. It's and then it's really bad when that's coming and you have like a plague pools at the same time.
Yeah,
because you're like, where does it begin? Where does it end?
Yeah, and I mean, this is one of those ones where it's like, I appreciate why it is. The development team, is basically, is bare bones and skeleton. Something that I'll segue into just in a little bit here. But these are all effects that pretty much already exist within game. That they went through and tied to it, and that's because they have a limited staff. They've got I imagine a limited budget with what they're allowed to go through and do with the game, but they still want to push Diablo 3 further. They want to add more content. They want to add more interesting mechanics and such. But when you're given these a finite amount of time and resources that you're allowed to go and do anything. And to my understanding, the current Diablo 3 team doesn't have an artist. That whenever they go through and they make these new sets, they're actually having to petition from help from the larger classic games division, or another artist from another team to go and work on the sets and such, in order to go and have those things included in the game. But it's something that they believe in and something that they want done, and so they make the effort to go forward and do that. And we see now that we've had our first job posting for Diablo 3 in ages, and they're looking for a technical artist. And so that's one of those ones where it's like, obviously there's enough interest and enough people that are going through and playing Diablo 3 that the devs have gotten the approval to increase the team size and get an artist on the team to go and push forward. What does this mean to me? I think that this is just kind of like the last couple of seasons where we've been having these new sets, and they've been pushing the seasonal themes a little bit more, that they want to go bigger. They want to go higher, and having like a dedicated artist in order to go through and do that is going to be good. For the overall content that we'll be getting in this game, and it's good for the future of the game, while we wait for the next thing.
Yeah, it's getting more people on the team is usually always, it's like 99.9% always a better deal, because that means there's just more manpower to go around. And there's been a lot of time in the past where we've heard like they wanted to do things, but like the budget wasn't there, development time allowances weren't there, or time developmental budgets weren't there, or they didn't have the resources, or the infamous, oh, that would be an art asset, which is like directly applicable to what you just said. But yeah, so if they're getting a new person, it'd be good, and it would also allow them to free themselves up and not be constrained by basically what assets they have. Okay, these are all the animation effects that we have. These are all the items we have. We are constrained to this box. If they have an artist, they can be like, no, we're not. We can try to come up with something that can work on a certain time frame, do it, put it in, and it's more unique. It's more, hopefully it's bigger, hopefully it's better, and then just continue going forward.
Yep. And it's just it's going to be the nature of one of those things. It's even Path of Exile has leagues that fall flat, that people don't like, or the bonus or such, it has to be hot fixed, like a couple of days or a week or two into the league itself. The team at GGG is very, very quick about going through and addressing those issues, and responding to feedback. But it's going to be par for the course. D3 is going to have seasons where the theme doesn't quite work out so well, kind of like with season 19, and or like where we're having the visual issues with the game right now. Will Blizzard go through and take care of that? I'm sure. It's just how long is it going to take in order for them to go through and do it, and then also just like before we segue too far out of the realm, I do also want to mention that people have been cheesing the seasonal theme to go on One Shot Rift Guardians. It was there was the possibility for it, and yep, sure enough, people have done it. So
yeah, like whenever you have a theme that's built around either like kill streaks or like timed buffs that are, even if they can't be directly manipulated or amplified by the character, if they could somehow be massaged, to use that phrase.
Yeah.
Eventually, if someone's poking and prodding, they'll figure out a way to use it around. And yeah, I've seen a couple of things like that. So it's like, it is what it is.
Yeah. It like you said, it is what it is, and that is just kind of the nature of it. Is I think it also will kind of be interesting. They probably will never really share with us the information, but I would love to go and see what the player base is like in between seasons that have kind of like this like the season 19 and the season 21 themes, where it has like this kind of like effect, that goes through and does and kills things for you. I think the season 21 is definitely a better iteration other than the season 19 theme. Um, but
Yeah.
it's at the same rate. I would think that, at least judging for things I've seen around on the internet and the feedback and the activity on, the Twitter, the forums, Reddit, and all those other types of stuff. I would almost say that, what was it, the season of the Ring of Royal Grandeur was probably, or the season of the Legacy of Nightmare, now Legacy of Dreams, was probably two of the most popular seasons because they had actual mechanical changes that really affect how you played the game instead of a nice little bonus that you could gain.
Yeah, I would even put last season with Kanai's Cube in there
Oh yeah.
because to a certain extent, I think what people enjoyed the most from those 3 seasons is that it's almost like it's weird to kind of do it, but like jumping to Diablo 4, like their premise for mythics,
Mm-hmm.
like how like if you get this mythic, it can open up a potentially brand new type of build that you wouldn't normally think of because of that one item. This is almost kind of like a different version of that in Diablo 3, where all those themes allowed for unique builds that just weren't possible.
Mm-hmm.
Ring of Royal Grandeur was, everyone thought like, oh, okay, like I sub out one item, big whoop. But it was like, but when people started theory crafting, like, oh no, wait, we can actually do like several pieces,
I
and we can
mean,
come up with something new.
mm-hmm.
The fact that the Legacy of Nightmares was so successful that they decided to make a legendary
A
gem
gem out
for
of
it,
it, yeah.
which kept it going. Which, for me personally, playing a wizard, getting to, because of that season, in season 20 made the LOD Hydra possible.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until like about like 2 to 3 weeks after playing LOD Hydra that I realized, oh wait a minute, this is a season specific build, because it was essentially like, it was all weapons are or like offhands in the cube. So I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh shit, like this is not going to be the same one. So that actually made me want to play it more and push higher with it with the group, because I realized this build's not sticking around as is as soon as the season's over. So the seasonal theme for 20 worked perfectly. It's a 10
Yeah.
out of 10. It made me want to engage with the mechanic, because I knew it was a limited time what I was able to do with that particular build, because it was special, it was unique. It was play it now or forever hold your peace.
Yep.
And I think
that would be the only time that you'd have the chance to play those builds.
Yeah, so I think that's the reason why those themes are actually liked, because it, as you said, mechanically changed how we thought about how to actually make builds.
Mm-hmm. I know that was one of those ones that was like, particularly like the Legacy of Dreams, that kept necromancers relevant, over the power creep in the past year. If the Legacy of Dreams was never implemented, all of the top necromancer builds, with the exception of like some very not fun to play, what you call it, pestilence, pestilence lancer builds, that they've all been, Legacy of Dreams builds have been the top thing to play. Whether it was the thorns, or like the singularity mages and things of that nature. It just was. It wasn't. It just wasn't the same. That the necromancers wouldn't be where they are now if it wasn't for that change, which kind of like goes back into the way that now that all the classes have the new sets, hopefully it's time to go back and readdress some of the older sets. I guess, which would kind of like, what if they go through and do that, it's going to be the endless cycle of set buffing, because every class has at least one set that just is not used at all and is just a joke.
What the hell is Firebirds, DMO, and
right?
Tals?
Yeah. When was the last time anybody's pushed with Rollins? You know, it's just or hell, you know, used Rathma, you know, Traghole or Narius. You know, it's there's a lot of
Yeah.
just, you know, sets that have fallen to the wayside and just don't get used for anything anymore. And uh, with Diablo 3, since we're still kind of waiting for the next thing, and it's kind of stuck in this mode where they have a limited development time with which to implement changes. Do we want a ever rotating wheel of well, these sets are getting buffed this season, so now they're the most powerful ones that you're going to go through and play until we get back around to your class to buff another set that makes that one the top. It's don't know. And that's just not even something that's on this current development team. It was the same thing with the old development team. When they did their round of set balancing, like that, a year after Reaper launched, when they were going and introducing the new set class, they're introducing the one new set class for each of the classes. And then they went back through and were like rebuffing a lot of the sets and such, and that they usually whatever set they were buffing at that time became the top build and left everything else in the dust, and then the other sets had to be brought up to that same level, normally surpassing it, and then those ones becoming the de facto.
It was like World of Warcraft syndrome, like back in vanilla days. It was like the class of the month syndrome.
Yeah,
like, okay, this month with this patch going live, warlocks and priests are gonna get buffed. So everyone would like decide like, oh, I'm just gonna start rolling because that's obviously gonna be the best. And every single time, it held true. Whatever class was getting buffed was the best. So as you said, like whatever in those early days, like whatever set was buffed, that was usually the de facto for that season, if not afterwards.
Yeah, and the one thing that I will give, with the current dev team is that one of the kind of like the tenets that was held with Diablo 3 for the longest time is nerf nothing, buff everything, and that got us the certain level of power creep that's led us to where we are today. But the current dev team, obviously with like last season and particularly this season, they're not afraid to nerf things if it's for the better overall balance of the game. They dropped like Mundanugus by orders of magnitudes by removing them as classified as pets, because when you have multiplicative set bonuses like the Mask of Jerem, not set bonuses but multiplicative bonuses such as the Mask of Jerem or the Enforcer Gem, those are huge nerfs to the damage of the overall build. And it's still like the best that there is, just to give an idea of how powerful that one was. So they're not afraid to nerf things if they're too out of line, and that's something I think will at least better address some balance issues with the game as time goes on. That they can bring some of the outliers down to kind of like a level that they should be, instead of trying to make everything, like a god tier build.
Yeah, and I hope that's actually really good to point out, because I think that was one of the not the jump to Diablo 4, but I think that was one of the first questions that was asked of the Diablo 4 dev team was like, are you guys gonna buff things only, or are you not afraid to nerf things? Because we've seen how that mentality, while it's great, because I think Wyatt is the one who said it, is that he didn't want a player to log in one day, play their character, and then log in the next day after a patch and then be weaker, which is 110% understandable from a developer's point of view, from a player's point of view as well. But then you also have to be a lot more careful with how power comes into it. What are your goals with power creep? What's acceptable, what's not, and
a lot of that has to do
what's
with
your mechanics for how to fix it. Because if you're not going to nerf like gear, then how are you going to adjust that? So I think with what they did this season is great. But I hope that it only carries over Diablo 4, where we as a player base are a lot more acceptable to stomach and accepting of like, oh, okay, this was clearly an outliner, fine, yeah, we'll give you that, as long as there's that communication back and forth of acceptance. But for Diablo 3, for this discussion, yeah, like it needs to happen, because if it doesn't, and we start getting into like another like 2 years of like buffing sets, it's like we start looking at people going, "What? You haven't done your 150 yet? What? Come on! It's the first week of the season. Come on, get on that." Chop chop.
Yeah, I think that that's one of those ones that kind of also goes into like the design philosophies behind the games that will probably be different between D3 and D4. That it really wasn't, not nerfing things and continually buffing the sets and classes wasn't as big of an issue with Diablo 3, because with the GR system up until recently, there was always more difficult content that they could push into. We're not hitting the ceiling yet, so it's fine. There's still more room to grow. If we buff it, over what was previously the top, that's fine. There's still more room to grow. And then now we've hit the ceiling, and we have classes solo clearing 150s. Which is definitely something that ties into it, as opposed to a different game, such as an MMO like World of Warcraft or something like that. Where there is just these flat difficulty curves, and so you have to keep things better balanced, especially when in Diablo 3, especially now, depending upon your class, you can solo 150. You can do all content by yourself. You don't need anybody else. Whereas in a game that emphasizes group content, you have to try and keep a level of balance maintained in between the different classes, because otherwise people will just they'll feel penalized for playing one class as opposed to another. And that will create, social impacts within the game. No one wants to bring a druid because, they're the lowest DPS, or if you're going to play a druid, well, you better be a shapeshifter, because elemental druid is just garbage. Oh, you're an elemental druid? So sorry, we have to kick you from the party now, because we're doing like a level 4 key dungeon, or something like that. And, it's like you can't, it's got the giant pillar that stomps around the board, and, you're going to be stuck casting. So we can't have you in the game. We need someone that can be mobile. So it's there's a lot of different things to go through and consider, where with how that design philosophy of all buffs, no nerfs, it can work for a game like Diablo 3 up until a certain point, when we get to the level that we're at now. But will that work for a game like Diablo 4? Probably not. Because I hope not. I hope that there is a not this infinitely scaling level of difficulty and such, unless it's something that it's each individual level as you go up, like kind of like with Mythics in World of Warcraft, where there is kind of like no upper level on Mythics. I'm sure that there is, because you can't design infinity. There has to be an upper limit, but no one's reached it. It's so ridiculously hard. No one's ever gotten to it. Nor do I think that anyone, ever will. But it is just one of those ones where it's like how you design the difficulty of the game will impact how you address player power.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I think that kind of covers up a lot as far as like Diablo 3 and such. Some of the good things and some of the bad things. I'm really excited. With how all of these class sets, sorry wizards, have kind of like worked out, across the board. Yeah, wizards seem to be the ones that were kind of luckless, because even though the barbarian set doesn't get a lot of people playing it, at least is it's decent in its own right, for what it can do. Yeah, and then them going through and expanding the team and actually going through and getting an artist is, I think, is going to be big. I think that one's gonna, it's gonna take some time. Obviously, it's Blizzard. They take 6 months, to fill associate level vacancies, let alone a senior level vacancy. It's going to take some time for them to go through, get someone onto the team, and then onboarding. We're probably not really going to see the impact of this particular job probably until the first season of the new year. So it's still at least 2-3 seasons away. But I think once whoever it is that they find to become that artist and such, we'll see a little bit more meaningful, at least visual effects from the season, instead of reusing pre-existing things. They'll be able to go in and tweak skeletals, rigs, and things like that to make something new and different.
Yeah.
Yep. But we also what was it? The Diablo 2 anniversary, the 20th anniversary has come and gone, and a lot of people were hoping for a remaster. Ever since a couple of months ago when that was we kind of had some of the first more substantial rumors as to the existence of the game. But of course, that was one of those ones that was at least telling to me. Blizzard usually doesn't comment on rumors, but they came out on this one. It's like, we're not announcing a D2 remaster for the 20th anniversary.
Yeah.
That
And you kind of understand why, because it's not that they've never done that before.
Yeah.
They've maybe done that one. I know they've done it at least once, if not twice, in the past. But like they really needed to, because like, oh
They're-
god, our community.
yeah, they're starting to understand. You can't let the Diablo community. You can't let them run with it. They will. The hype train is a very real thing, and its speed increases at an exponential rate. And if you don't stop it, before it leaves the station, there is no stopping it. Like, with
No.
with the Diablo Immortal announcement, they came out and said, we're not announcing Diablo 4. And people were still disappointed when they did not announce Diablo 4. It was already past that point. It's like they said it like a week before the convention, but it was too late. People are like, nah, they're joking. They wouldn't wait. They wouldn't wait this long to go through and say it. They're just joking. It's a false flag. They're announcing Diablo 4. What do you mean they didn't announce Diablo 4? So they're learning. Yeah, they're definitely going through and learning. And knowing that you have to curb the enthusiasm of the Diablo community.
Yeah, you have to kind of take the community like a little child, stroke its hair, be like, be okay. You're not gonna get what you want right now.
Mhm.
I'm gonna tell you if it's coming in the future, but everything will be all right. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, Billy. Okay, go.
And-
Everything will be okay.
And then there's one thing that I kind of like tie in two different topics into one thing, and that is the Diablo 2 remaster and Diablo Immortal. And now for the last 2 quarters, Activision has said that they have a regional testing slotted for mid-year 2020 to start testing with Diablo Immortal, but haven't given any more of a definite time frame for that. And that could, kind of like go like the mid-third of the year is like May to August type thing. So it still could be a couple months away. But a lot of people were expecting the last week of June, since that would kind of be like the mid-year, would come with some more information on that regional testing for Diablo Immortal. And now Riker had a very interesting theory on this one, in that
Yes.
yeah, that there was I think it was the French site that had originally broke the rumor for the D2 remaster, as well as like some other European streamer or personality or something was going through and saying that there would be the D2 remaster announcement on the 20th anniversary of Diablo 2, that prompted Blizzard to respond that we're not announcing that, and that even though that they had an announcement planned for Immortal last week, they didn't do it because the community got themselves into a frenzy over the potential of a D2 remaster. And so they learned their lesson what happened like last time with Immortal, where the community got itself into a frenzy over D4, and then they announced Immortal. We don't have to rehash what happened, but that if they wanted to prevent another similar scenario where people were expecting a D2 remaster and then they announced more information on Immortal, even though it wouldn't be on the 20th anniversary for Diablo 2, it wouldn't have any connection to it whatsoever, but to then not announce the D2 remaster or a D2 remaster, saying the D2 remaster makes it seem as if it is a done deal, which we don't have no official confirmation, so it still is rumors. But to then go and, like I say, a couple days later, announce an Immortal regional testing, would probably sit negatively with the community. And that, Riker's kind of theory of how all of this coordinates together, because the person that had leaked the D2 remaster had said that per their sources that were weeks old, that there was supposed to be an Immortal announcement the same week as the D2 Diablo 2 20th anniversary. And it seems that didn't happen, so it somehow was delayed. And it's kind of like, it's obviously it's just a theory, but it's one that does make sense, in terms of PR, and having reading the room, I guess, would probably be the best way of describing it, of having the ability to read the room and know when you should announce something and when you shouldn't, and how much, even if it's 1 or 2 weeks, how much feedback are you really going to be missing out on a game, versus having the news cycle for the regional testing of the game be dominated by fans expected D2 remaster, disappointed by Immortal announcement, as opposed to just Diablo Immortal regional testing has begun.
Blizzard disappoints once again. Like that would be like the majority of all the headlines and everything. I mean, yeah, it makes sense. And when I saw the video where Riker put that theory forward, I'm like, yeah, it makes sense because our community, if it's a rumor, it must be real.
Yes.
And yeah, I mean, there's nothing really more to add to it. It's just
man,
like one of the.
I'm still waiting on PvP in patch 1.10.
Oh my god, I still find it funny that D3 ended on patch 1.09 too. Like
they
history
just,
lesson.
Yeah, they just did not want to go for it.
Yeah. But yeah, it's like Immortal and now this whole D2 remaster, resurgence, resurrected, whatever you want to call it, or kind of like like ghosts in the wind. It's like they're there, but they're not, and they won't be until we're officially told. So
yeah,
it's like hopefully sooner than later. I mean, I've always looked forward to Immortal because of the way that it was taking Diablo 3 and just kind of taking it to the next level with how they're doing skill interactions, how they were doing things. I think I'm gonna play if it works well enough on BlueStacks. I think that's gonna be my preferred way of playing it. But I'm kind of like our dear mobile friend Echo, and just like waiting, like when is this gonna come out? When can we play this? When can we try?
Yeah, as I've been going through and revisiting the lore, of all the games and other things like that, I've been kind of like looking at Immortal through another light, and that is, from the same kind of point of view of Diablo 4. Because Immortal is going to be taking place all over the world. There's going to be lots of different places and locations that you can interact with, and just all the lore and the story, and just how much of that 20 years in between D2 and D3 have not been explored. With Carbots going through and starting the new Diablos for Diablo 2 series. I went back and I rewatched all of the remastered D2 cinematics, which they show their age. They really show their age. This is turn of the millennium, 2000, 2001 graphics, which were amazing at the time. But they still have a certain nostalgic value, and they still trigger an emotional response all these years later. And that's just like going back and rewatching the epilogue of Lord of Destruction when Tyrael destroys the World Stone, and there are a lot of shards that are just getting thrown out there. What happened to all of them? And that's what Immortal is going to go through and answer. And it looks like we're going to talk more about how demons resurrect and a whole bunch of unanswered questions that have always been skirted around by the Diablo lore in general, that have me excited for it.
Yeah. And on that topic, briefly, I thought I had a real chuckle when Immortal was announced, because even though this was for like the sequel to Diablo 3, because we kind of wondered what happened to the Black Soulstone after Diablo was killed. And I was thinking, like, okay, the Black Soulstone landed on Sanctuary in like all these pieces, and the next expansion was going to be us running around trying to collect these pieces, and depending on how we felt, we would become more like angels or more like demons and everything like that. And if somebody asked me like, well, what would the title of, like, give me a title for this expansion, I'd be like Diablo Inuyasha. Because it would be like collecting all the pieces like in the anime. And now like Immortal, we're literally doing that. We're going around collecting pieces of the World Stone and using them as either power or part of the story. I'm like, oh, okay.
I believe the Diablo 3 expansion was actually King of the North. but that's a topic for another time.
Yep.
Um, but it's like also going through and of course comparing and contrasting with Diablo 4. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, the Diablo 4 dev blog has still been a hot topic within the community. People are still continuing to go through, post things around the internet. So there's some people on Reddit talking about like cooldown usage and stuff like that within the last couple of days. And I know you just recently went through and put up your own thoughts and feedback, for the D4 dev blog. And now we are running about an hour and a half in, and so don't want to draw it out for too much longer. But if you would like to kind of give some of your feedback and some of what you at least think were some of the more important parts, from the blog.
I mean, really, overall, I mean, like I said in my feedback, like this was like a big world. This seemed to be like a big world building kind of dev blog, which is great. I mean, to like go through and see the images, like when I talk about the block out and how they showed like how an area looks like with just that standard grid, and that's what a lot of it looks like just for playtesting, to get a sense of, like, for instances, does this feel like it's a good amount for your character to move through? Does it feel like you're running through this hallway forever? Like little things like that. It was actually really cool to see, and I actually put photos from a Left 4 Dead map that I was creating back in the day that looks the same. It's dev texture, so it's basically different colored grids, so you can distinguish a building from a floor, from a walkway, from a railing, so you know what everything is, but it just doesn't look like it. And it's all, and I did like 3 images in there, so it's like I'm accustomed to kind of seeing that, albeit through a different game. So I thought that was just a cool little behind the scenes, as well as a lot of this was really cool and behind the scenes. It was actually really interesting to see how far along they bring a monster before they consider like good for block out. Because that monster, like fully sculpted, all like it has pretty much has all its details, like any kind of like lighting maps or anything that are baked into it for just a shadowing effect. I mean, that looks like any other, you could say any other AAA game. They would consider that maybe like the end. Like if they want to call that like a gargoyle and just keep that kind of aesthetic, it would basically be done.
Because all that's pretty much missing is just textures and like lighting or ray tracing or whatever.
Yeah,
it is that they're going to be using.
So it's interesting to see where their benchmarks are at the same time for what they consider behind the scenes and development versus what we the players see as the final product. And I think that also leads credit to where we've always said for the longest time, and I think it still holds true, Warcraft 3 notwithstanding, that Blizzard betas are equivalent to other companies' final products. Like there's that much more polish and effort put in during the beta phase to release than most other companies put in to their release.
Yeah, and I will say that's actually one of the things that there was a World of Warcraft developer talk earlier today, in which obviously not talking about World of Warcraft, but one of the things that they mentioned that their philosophies behind betas was that the game wouldn't enter into a beta test scenario until all the systems of the game were testable. And, so that's definitely one of the things that they look for, and I'm sure it is a design philosophy that's kind of shared across most of the development teams within the company.
Yes, and to clarify, I meant Warcraft Frozen Throne, or Warcraft 3, the classic game that just came out. I didn't mean World of Warcraft, not to get.
I thought you were talking about Reforged.
Yes, Reforged. Yes, exactly. Okay,
yeah.
I didn't say it, so I didn't want to get wires crossed, but just to continue, like when they get to like the storytelling, and like thinking about it, like we had those like dialogue boxes on the bottom, and we're accustomed to that, and it was good. It was able to pass the storyline if you were into that kind of thing. But like the little steps, like how they're gonna, if they can, zoom in the camera, so it almost feels like you're almost breaking the fourth wall in a weird way, and the game's sucking you into the conversation, so you really pay attention. So like little things like that,
How
the real time.
it doesn't break the mood. It allows you to kind of like stay in the
Yeah.
game without, pulling you in. As much as I love like the hand drawn kind of like journal entry cinematics that we had in D3, it could be very jarring, because all of a sudden you just defeated the Skeleton King, and you find the stranger at the bottom of the meteor pit, and then all of a sudden, boom, Raven.
Yeah. Yeah, and how like the real time cutscenes are going to use your character the way it's built. It's actually it seems very weird to see, not see say, but it's like we're almost entering like the World of Warcraft level of story engagement. Like World of Warcraft players have had like it's like they've had it for so long they're used to it, but it's like the amount of in-game like it's like cinematic quality.
They're putting more emphasis on the RPG of the ARPG.
Yeah, it's like the real-time cutscenes that in like Legion and even more so in BFA, like the amount of girth and added story and nuance to the world is exponentially increased by all of these things, and to now to have that be kind of carried over, and just Diablo 5 for us can only enrich our experience on our playthrough of the main campaign and the side quests, which segues into the new camps feature on how there'll either be a camp overrun by a group of bandits, or there'll be a curse on it, like the example, affected where everyone's turned to pillars of salt, very biblical. Yep. And how that is gonna give more depth to the world and how you can actually impact it. And I think like overall, until we get to items, which we've discussed before in the weeks past, it's like I love all of it. I love everything they're showing us. I love everything they're doing. It's like the only real, I don't want to say it's a big concern, because I have enough faith that they'll be able to pull it off. It's like Diablo 4 is going to be an Olympic-sized swimming pool. I just hope it's not 6 inches deep. So while I love the camps idea, I hope it's not. I hope that through learning, like crafting and further depth and itemizations, and even dungeons and endgames, that when you unlock a camp, that there's more to it than just unlocking a camp. Like, maybe this specific camp will have some rare crafting materials, or maybe this one will unlock a specific dungeon that's really good for you, or things that we can't even think about that they have on 35 whiteboards in their conference rooms. I just hope that the depth is not one step forward, that there's a second and a third step to all these systems, because it's not just to have depth for the sake of depth, but it's to make sure that all these systems feel like they're not one and done. I think that's the one thing we can all agree with. Like, we don't want one and done systems. Like challenge rifts are basically one and done. You do it once, you're doing it for the cash. If it wasn't for the cash, you probably wouldn't be doing it.
Yeah.
Like,
I guess that's one of those big questions that people have had since like kind of like the reveal of those camps is, is it a one and done? Is it a permanently unlock, or is there the potential that as time goes on, something else happens? It's like we save that one village from the curse that turns them all into salt, and then like a couple days later, all of a sudden, bandits have taken over the town. It's like, will there be a draw that to bring us back to those camps, or are they a finite resource?
Yeah, and that would actually be what you just said would be pretty cool, because again, it would be giving life to this world. That I think that's something that I think all the players who even remotely care about immersion want desperately in Diablo 4. We want to feel immersed. We want to feel like we're part of this world, and this world is dangerous. It's dark. It wants to kill us.
Yeah, and I think you kind of hit it there when you said we want to be immersed. Like, everybody, whether or not you care about the story or anything like that, I believe that there's definitely a trend there that people want to be more engaged by the world or the setting that they're playing in, and that's what kind of like defines the difference between whether I'm playing a Diablo game or Path of Exile or Grim Dawn or World of Warcraft or Darkest Dungeon, is that they all have their own feel, you know, a nature of the game that we get drawn to outside of the systems or mechanics or anything like that, you know, that helps us pick one particular game over the other. And if you have those systems of a more persistent world, you know, where the things that you do in the game have long lasting changes, you know, or you have to defend those changes that you've made, give you a little bit more tie to it.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, it's everything just like works out like the way, especially when it's kind of hard. Like the one picture they show in the multiplayer, the screenshot there. I don't know if you have it rigged up to where you can show, but
I
it's
can
like
find it.
the images of the camps and that image. Um, Even though I never played Diablo 2, I understood the roughness, how the world looked. It didn't look it didn't look safe. It didn't look inviting. It was rough. It was dangerous. And when I look at these images and I see how they're going for, like, you know, thematically for the world and how they're creating these zones, it looks like the world has that sense of roughness, that sense of the world is not your friend. And that was something I was also I don't want to say harping on, but trying to bring back to the forward
Mm-hmm.
in the DevHell article, because I originally wasn't going to write a environmental section. It didn't occur to me, but then when I started thinking about it, I'm like, you know, the environment is the stage. It's like you can have a game that's like Diablo 3. You can have a game that's built around Whimsydale in Diablo 3, and that's your environment.
Mm-hmm.
If you had everything, like if you had a game like Diablo 3 with all the classes where the environment was Diablo, you know, the typical environments, Tristram and all over the world of Diablo 3, or just like Whimsydale, where it's all those kind of crazy things, it makes an impact.
Mm-hmm.
You would pick definitely one over the other. So the more I thought about it, like, you know, the environment is the stage, the monsters, the weather, the day night cycles, and all those are actors on that stage. But the player is an actor too, because you interface with it. So it was like like, so when we got to Diablo 4, I was like, you know, the stage, the environment really needs to be brought back to a glory. Not, and I wasn't one of those people that was saying like it needs to be darker, it needs to be more bloody, because you can get really desensitized to that very quickly, especially in a video game. But I think that they're really nailing that. They're creating a narrative with the environment, which I think is the best way to go around it.
Mm-hmm.
And really, the last thing being the items and the progression. In our conversation, you know, the last couple of weeks as well, it's like it's interesting, but basically we have to kind of take the items as face value, because like if you were to bring up a concern or an assumption based on any of those, it's like we don't have other items or the deeper blog that's hopefully coming sooner than later in the year to give us hopefully a better sense of context to judge those said items. But at pure face value, it's nice to see that there's more affix types they're going with, like gem strength is one of them,
Mm-hmm.
or how the ring has that interplay between, if you use one set of type of skills, it helps out the other, and then the second part of that legendary affix is the inverse. So there's a cyclical positive kind of feedback if you decide to go that route. But it's really hard to judge them because we don't have context. So it's like really tough. It's like, I'm glad we see those items, but at the same time, it's like we need more, not because we're greedy, but because that's the only way we're ever going to be able to give some kind of objective feedback, and it's just not that time yet. So
Yeah.
hopefully that part, that
I,
beefier of quarterly update comes sooner than later in the year.
Yeah, as we discussed in the past, I think it's one of those ones where it's like they're not asking for, you know, like they're not looking for like balance feedback or anything like that. They're just like, do these affixes look interesting? These affixes things that you would find interesting for gameplay reasons, things of that
And even
nature.
that's like, well, we're not actively playing an alpha build or a beta build, so it's like, maybe,
Yeah,
I don't know.
I guess, yeah, because you can put together in your head like what the items, like kind of like the play styles that they would engage.
Yeah,
You know,
it's like, that gem strength affix. It's like, but what are the gems? We don't
yeah,
know.
yeah,
You
yeah,
can't know.
that one definitely. Like to me, like the gem strength affix is basically like, well, this is a reason for me to not use runes. We haven't had any updates on rune
Exactly.
words.
Yeah, yeah,
Obviously,
yeah.
people had a lot of feedback on the lack of depth that the rune word system
Mhm.
had. Particularly, they weren't rune words. They were just like runes.
Yeah, it's like
You know,
it's a little bit disservice to call them Rune Roads.
yeah,
Even I understood that. Not a Diablo 2 player, I understood that.
yeah. There's just kind of like these cause effect systems. If you did X, then Y happens. With the way that they were set up.
Hmm.
Um, and then they also, because we saw an idea of what runes were and what rune words did, but we have no idea what gems do. They talked about gems, but they've not shown any gems. We don't know what they do. And so when we go through and we see that gem strength in an item, we really have no concept of what that actually does. Is it angelic power? Like something that you put forward in your blog. It is a lot of our power scaling going to be tied, to gems, and so having to use gems in place of rune words is a choice that you're going to have to make. As on like the player side. And is those gem strength affixes going to be one of those ones that pushes us more so on one side, or are the gem strength affixes just going to be straight up take X less damage, deal Y more damage, take X less Y Z plus whatever to healthy enemies, or something like that. It's like, are that's what gems going to be? Or are they going to be more like jewels? In Diablo 2. It was like in Diablo 3, gems are relatively straightforward. Sorry for the
Yeah.
sound effect there. Someone followed me on my channel, and even though I don't have Twitch alerts enabled on this profile, is showing up on this channel. I'll look up who you are and thank you, but it doesn't actually show me. It just does the sound for it. Um, but it's one of those ones where it's like that one is I guess like it looks interesting. I can appreciate the idea that it's something to tempt us away from always using runes, which is good. You don't want you don't just want to have topazes or rubies in all of your gear slots. You want reasons to use other things and have like a mixed system. We maybe not necessarily the 4015s from D2, but something akin to it.
Yeah.
Which is it's increased damage and increased attack speed. As they actually were like all like wiped because they weren't real. They couldn't exist in the game and they were like hacked items or something along those lines. But it's just some of the more interesting things that can exist like kind of like across the spectrum of affixes. Or my point that we have no idea if any of these items are balanced or what they do, but like just the druid items, you if you use earth skills, your storm skills crit more often, and then you have the other item that causes your storm skills that whenever they crit, you have an AoE dot around you, which means that, well, I'm going to be an elemental blasty guy, but I also have to be close to the enemies so that way they're getting in the cyclone. So you
Hmm.
can see like the changes that it would make for gameplay, without really knowing anything about the system or other items in general, just from looking at that. I can see those two things, and I have an idea of how to play that spec, which I think is also, in terms of readability, a good thing.
Yeah, I think if if we or the community was to take away anything from those item previews, it was exactly what you just said. It was to demonstrate that items would be readable for even though we have basically little to no understanding of the game still at this point, and we've been there, we've played the demo however many times.
Not as
It was
many
still,
times as I would have liked.
yeah, hey, you and me both. It was, you could still look at the items and say, okay, this does this does that. So you can, okay, this skill, and maybe another filler skill in between. So yeah, you're very easily able to read those items and be able to start formulating a build right there on the spot. But even more so, just talking about sockets, something that you brought up years ago, and whenever I've referenced it in my DevHel articles, I call it specifically, either I reference like like the conversation you had, because there was a conversation between you and Leviathan during the Westmarch Workshop podcast again years ago, and I call it the Great Socket Debate, because the Great Socket Debate is almost like the inverse of the same situation when it comes like talents or fitting items in builds. Normally there's just a best in slot item, so that's the de facto. But when it comes to sockets, there's like so little options that you just pick this one because it's the only option. So the value of sockets is actually relatively low because there's no meaningful choice. Because the way I look at the term meaningful in regards to in terms of like Diablo, like what gives this item meaning is really, how does this item add value to my current build? How does it add value to having a different build that's equal or less value? And in determining that value also determines is how meaningful it is. So when you apply that to sockets, well, if I'm playing a demon hunter, I'm going to put an emerald in there because that gives me dex. That's the only real meaningful choice, therefore very little value. But now if they're going to try to have runes along with gems, maybe other things that we don't know about, because again, we know nothing of crafting. They could have a really robust crafting in Diablo 4. They're creating different sources of value, which means the meaningful choices are hopefully will be there, and then sockets will actually be decision points again, because they haven't been for a really long time, but they could be such a great source of not power but utility, which is I think another thing a lot of people want in Diablo 4. Like, give us different ways to gain utility, not just power.
Yeah, and it's one of those ones where it's like if we go back a step and we go back to Diablo 2, sockets were a very different thing. Like in D3, everything has a limited number of affixes that it can roll. Sockets take up one of those. In D2, not so much, because you could add sockets to anything. It's just if it wasn't a regular item, it would only add one socket. But there wasn't any hard fast coding for the number of sockets that uniques had, so that was one of the draws of how much power that they contained, was because they didn't go by the normal number of affixes, because like blues and yellows had like lists of just like how many that they could possibly have based on their item level and such, but uniques just kind of like threw all those metrics out the window. And like some uniques, they essentially had a bonus, like what was it, like Scolder's Ire, would have what was it? It would have like 3 sockets, 4 sockets. And that was one of the cool things, because it was a unique item that had multiple sockets, and that set it apart from a lot of other items. And then of course rune words themselves were actually, like you mentioned, like crafting, and that was thinking like rune words at their essence was player crafting. That's what they were. And so that way you could take, these mats that you found out in the wild, that you put them together in a certain combination, all of a sudden it created a powerful item. And that's what rune words were. It was a form of player crafting that put a little bit more agency on the player side of it, of how that they could go through, use those resources with which to empower their character. It also gave a usefulness to your common items, because you couldn't put rune words into, you might have a magic item that had 4 sockets, but it you couldn't put a rune word in it. It had to be a base regular item in order to take a rune word. if you take a magical item that had multiple sockets, because there were magic affixes of having sockets on the gear and such, that you could put the runes. You'd gain the base effect of the runes themselves, but you wouldn't gain the rune word.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's so a lot of things, a lot of interesting stuff to come out of that dev blog. A lot of interesting discussions. I think a lot of us are definitely going through and looking forward to the next one, when they're going to be getting into a bit more of the meatier subjects of such as itemization, player progression, and things of that nature. Which hope to go through and see more. I am of course sad that there is no BlizzCon this year, with which that will be able to actually test out some of these thoughts and theories that they're going and having and discussing with the dev blog. But I guess patience is a virtue, and good things come to those who wait. Right.
Yeah, and even on that note, I mean, it's going to be interesting because when the next BlizzCon comes around, it's going to be 2 years. So we're going to hopefully it'll be like, well, our minds will be blown, because like the game will at that point had like between a year and a half to say like a year and 9 months of like extra development and stuff. You leave 2 or 3 months for like the team, like, okay, this is the demo, this is where we stop. Now we're just bug fixing the hell out of it so the demo runs clean enough for show purposes. But that's a lot of dev time between demos. So hopefully our minds will be like, holy crap, what'd they do?
Yeah, and I can only hope that that next time that we play it, that we're getting closer to the actual beta timing, as we'd be 2 years out from the original announcement. But who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows what the future holds? And we definitely remain hopeful with the things that we hear from Diablo IV. But of course, going through giving I had grievances with the itemization system that I talked about in the last episode. So I won't really rehash it here, but it's like there's definitely good things to come from it, and when you see problems or bad things with the direction that things are heading, it's still good with which to give that feedback in a constructive way. You can't just say it's bad.
It's like half the Reddit things like,
it's like, if you
hire more people,
if your feedback is like, this is like Diablo 3, that doesn't help. You have to say why you don't like that. You can't just say this is like Diablo 3.
And more importantly, say what you do like. Give our direction. It's like,
yeah. I mean, that's kind of like the hand in hand of going through and being constructive. Is tell them why you don't like it and what you think would be a better course to take. But yeah, we're pretty much going to be going through and closing up the show here. I want to thank everybody that came out and joined us here in chat, including that the little random follow that we had there in the middle. I do have to figure that one out, because again, I don't have Twitch alerts enabled on this profile, yet it still does it. I don't understand, but whatever. I'll figure it out. But yeah, and of course, thank you again, Dred, for going through and being on the show here. And if you'd like to give some any shout outs or last minute things with which to where people can find you on the internet and all that.
Sure. Usual best place is to find me on Twitter, and that's at Dredscythe. That's DREDSCYTHE. And similarly, now with the website launching, it's dredscythe.com. Username, go on at that. That's where I'll be reposting my dev blogs there, so it's a more concentrated place for all that. I'll also be posting them on BlizzPro as well at the same time, as well as doing my personal blog. I'm going to try to hold myself to doing one blog at least every 2 weeks, and then try to get up to once every week. See how that all works out with the flow of topics and everything like that, as well as working on that greater community page. So there's something there, as well as in the future an events page that will be used for displaying pictures of our excursions and excited adventures at BlizzCons past and future. So that's where you can find me, and that's what's going to be doing.
All right, yeah, and again, thank you. And of course, if you like the content that I do here, if you like the show, please feel free to go ahead, follow the channel, or follow the show over on Twitter. It's the WM Workshop on Twitter, or you can follow me personally. I'm at 9ballgamer. And of course, you can find the show live here, usually every other Wednesday at twitch.tv/BlizzPro. But the way that things have been going lately, so I've been having this weekly streak. We'll see if we can go through and maintain it. But you can find out more about my shows, over at the WM Workshop. And of course, you can find Westmarch Workshop on YouTube. Just do a quick search there, and you can find it on your podcasting platform of choice: Stitcher, iTunes, all those other sorts of places you can go through and find it. And of course, if you have any questions or feedback, for the show, please feel free to email me at westmarchworkshop@blizzpro.com, and be sure to check out diablo.blizzpro, for all of your Diablo news. And with that, I wish you all a good night.